Every day, adults exploit and abuse minors online. My name is Roo.
All right, any quiet?
And my organization helps law enforcement stop them.
He has multiple pseudonyms, and he does that because he needs to protect his real identity.
And it's making it almost impossible to find him.
What do I need to find you don't trust me?
Well, you are a stranger on the internet.
I'm sorry.
I'm a 38-year-old mother of 3, but with the help of my team, I transform into a teenage girl.
When we create a persona, it's like we're creating a person out of thin air.
I'm Mia, and Lizzie, and Hannah.
He did turn the conversation to supremely sexual last night. So he's committed a crime.
I think I found him.
No way. That's him.
We don't really know how dangerous these guys truly are just behind a screen.
I'm sending your to Interpol because I got your IP address too. I know what the rules in the UK are about that. You would go to jail. Do not reach out to a girl under 18 online ever again.
We're gonna try and follow the van and see which way he goes.
Hey.
Oh my God.
He said he's here.
We become the target
Get inside, now!
to help protect the underage.
I think you should duck down. He's staring straight at you.
Welcome to Dialogue, a true crime conversation. I'm your host, Rebecca Sebastian, and that you just heard was a trailer from the new Discovery Plus show, Undercover Underage. And wow, I think this is a must-watch for anyone. There's a lot of reasons to watch and you'll love it, but any parents, caregivers, guardians, people with young ones that you care about in your life, please don't miss this one, because the issue of online predators, it's not getting better. However, the good news, my guest that I speak to today, the work she's doing should give us some comfort in a pretty bleak scenario. Roo Powell is a writer and the founder of a nonprofit called SOSA, Safe from Online Sex Abuse. And she is the star subject of this Discovery Plus series, Undercover Underage. Roo is going to tell us all about this work that she does, the reality of online dangers that exist. Please share this episode. It's just such an important one. It's important that we work together to create a safer existence for our kids online. And we discuss this, but no matter what you do or don't monitor for the kids and the teens in your life, if they're alive, they're online, and therefore they are at risk. So this was a fascinating, eye-opening conversation. And I will also say that the show is very fast-paced, and just from a true crime point of view, it's a great watch. There's some citizen detective work definitely involved with Roo's team, so you don't have to be a parent or guardian to appreciate the show. So with that, I really hope you enjoy this conversation. I also hope everyone in the United States has a happy Thanksgiving. I'm going to be sending out a giving guide for Giving Tuesday. Just sort of some places where you can donate your time, your resources, places where you can put some of this true crime advocacy to work. And I will be including SOSA in that newsletter. So look for that next week. But in the meantime, you can find more information about SOSA in the show notes, as well as all of Roo's social media handles. Happy Thanksgiving. I am so grateful for each one of you for listening. I especially want to thank all of my patrons, the diehards. Your feedback, your camaraderie, your support, it means so much to me. And if you like this show and would like to consider supporting it, take a look at patreon.com/dialogue for ways to do so. I would be ever so grateful. Okay, let's kill the small talk with Roo Powell of Undercover Underage on Discovery Plus. Roo, welcome to Dialogue Podcast. Really nice to meet you. Cannot wait to talk to you.
Thank you so much for having me.
It's a pleasure. So I've been introduced to you via your new limited series show on Discovery Plus, Undercover Underage. And it is a wild ride from one mother of 3 to another. Thank you for your service. How did you start this nonprofit SOSA? Why don't you tell everybody what SOSA is and how this idea transpired?
Sure. So SOSA is a nonprofit. It stands for Safe from Online Sex Abuse. And our whole goal is to combat the online sex abuse and exploitation of children. So I am a career-long writer, and I've written about a lot of things that are important to me, really a lot around child advocacy, including sex trafficking and abuse and the refugee crisis. And I was working in the tech space, and my team and I had put a decoy online so we could kind of demonstrate for people the ubiquity of online predation. I wrote a piece about it, and it went viral. It got a lot of media attention, and I decided this is where I want to spend my time. What can I do to really move the needle here? And that's when I started SOSA.
And so when was the idea that you yourself would become the decoy?
It was not the most well thought out process. We just knew you can't put a real teenager on the internet. And, I have excellently chubby cheeks, and we had a team full of designers that could edit me, and, Snapchat filters are aplenty. So let's just try it. And at that time, we weren't going into nearly the process that we're going now with really building out a background. And so we really just put a couple photos online and called it a day. But we were stunned by the response. And so, it wasn't a terribly thought out plan, but it was what we had in the moment. You don't want to use stock images. First of all, it's against terms of service. And also you feel sorry for the poor model that you can't do that.
Seriously, she didn't sign up for that.
Right. And then also nobody on my team signed up for that either. So I'm like, we can edit me enough. It'll be fine. We have the power of the internet. And so that's what we did.
Yes. You referenced your chubby cheeks. I would say youthful, appeal. But you also have 3 kids. So was it so helpful to have your own daughters living and breathing and their lived experience around you to kind of draw from?
I think that was actually probably a barrier, because we would pick out clothing and I'd go, nope, can't use that. My daughter owns that t-shirt. Or we would pick out a hobby and I'm like, nope, my daughter has those posters all over her room. Can't do that. I can't, I need to have that separation. Or if I'd wear a shirt, then as a decoy, then that shirt becomes cursed, and that does not cross the threshold of my home.
Oh my
because
gosh,
there's nothing worse than forgetting and like keeping a sweatshirt in the back of your car, and then your kid walks out wearing it because she needed to borrow a sweatshirt, and you're like, take it off. It's a cursed sweatshirt. So less of that and more like that became a mental block for me, that I really needed to make some separations between the person I was as a decoy and my actual kids.
That makes perfect sense when you say it that way. So before we get to, into the show and the premise and some of what happens there, you say this is ubiquitous. And I think a lot of people know that, like, we know there's sexual predators online, but how big a problem, how pervasive is this? Like, what would surprise people to know? And it is scary and it is terrifying, but I think many of us choose to almost not read too much about it or go too deep to our own demise. Like, not knowing is not helping. So what do we need to know?
Well, part of it too is that there's always so much stuff going on in the world. It's like, how much crisis can how much can our brains take, right? There is a stat that gets thrown around a lot that I don't love using just because I haven't been able to verify it myself, but lots of people use it. So I'll just go ahead and use it. And let's say, even if it's off by 50%, it's still a big number.
Okay.
But the thought is that there are about 500,000 predators online each day.
Every day.
Whether or not that's true, I don't know, but I can tell you this much. The team that we had during that sprint that we did that you see on Undercover Underage, we had a few decoys, we had a full team, we had a support staff. We worked so many hours, and we became so busy with the influx of perpetrators coming in, the influx of ACMs, we call them ACMs, adults contacting minors. We were so overwhelmed with the influx that we had to shut down some of the decoys and just say, like, we can't touch these accounts. There are just too many coming in. So it's not like there were ever times that we were just kind of sitting there going, maybe someone will reach out today. It's just that we did not have the people power, the hours, the time, in order to tackle everything that was coming in. We left a lot on the table, which usually we talk about that in a good thing. Like, we left money on the table. We let a lot of crimes like kind of sit on the table. A lot of people who want to break the law. And I think that's what people find. I think that's what any like law enforcement team would find as well. Like, these people are a ten a penny.
Oh, sorry, I'm just letting that
No,
sink.
your face. I'm like,
just
I
letting
said the
that
wrong thing.
sink. No, I'm just letting it sink in. And not only is there a volume issue, it's, you know, the escalation in the calls that you got, that we see happen on the show with these adults contacting minors. It progresses, some of them very quickly. And so you do get the sense that they do this often. Some of them you verify, likely this isn't their first time. It's just very, it's very sobering. You mentioned law enforcement. So your nonprofit operates independently outside of law enforcement. You don't make arrests. You're not like a sting operation. You are capturing information and then handing it over to the appropriate department, agency officials. Could you talk a little bit about your team and what the operation looks like?
That's a great question. So when we drop a decoy in a city, we've already communicated with law enforcement in that city. So there are no surprises. However, these ACMs are nationwide, right? Or they're international. So I could be partnering with Orlando police, like you see in episode 2, but a perpetrator could be in New Mexico. Well, what happens there? Well, there's some liaising that has to be done. We are not law enforcement. We do not make arrests. We're not prosecutors. In fact, we have to try to be as unbiased as possible, because it is not that's actually why we use the term ACM, because we don't want to assume that when an adult reaches out to a minor that they are going to break the law. So we try to give it as neutral a term as possible. And so we just hand that information over, and then law enforcement does what law enforcement does, whether they take that information and they do an independent investigation outside of our evidence, or they use our evidence, or they use our logins. You know, we are happy to work with law enforcement in a number of ways. The last thing we want to be is to hinder their process, or to do something that would make our work just completely useless. Because I'm not going to put myself through all of that just to find out that, oh, all the work you did was useless in this case. Then why on earth would I bother? Why on earth would I traumatize myself? You know,
we'll get to the trauma for you. But yeah, for example, you can't bait them. You can't, you know, put ideas into their heads and try and have them bite. You're letting them drive this process, and you are following. Like, how do you define it? Because you do have to be careful not to trap, right?
Right. Well, I do take a very Socratic method where, you know, so I'll put it this way. We have never reached out to an ACM first. We post online. We often say right at the outset, like with our bio, you know how you have like a Twitter bio or Instagram bio, 15 years old, 14 years old, you know, going into my freshman year, something along those lines. They reach out first. We, again, assert age, and we continue to assert age. So we take a very conservative approach. Different law enforcement departments will do things different ways. So if I'm working with law enforcement in one city, they might have different rules. And if I'm working with law enforcement in another city, they might have rules that are a lot more relaxed. Sure. We always go by the most conservative rules possible. And then based on what a specific law enforcement department wants us to do, then we'll take their lead. Because again, we're just here to be helpful, not to be an obstruction in any way. So, you know, there are some bright line rules. There are certain things that we absolutely won't do. But we're able to, you know, we've consulted prosecutors and law enforcement to make sure that we are not even towing the line of, you know, baiting or entrapment or any of these other terms that a lot of people might want to use.
And has there been any, obviously the episodes we're seeing are where you've partnered with law enforcement, they know what you're doing, so they're in, you know, this is a cooperative relationship. Have there been agencies that have been like, we don't want to have anything to do with this? Or have you had pushback or resistance from other departments? You don't have to name them. I'm just curious.
No, I wouldn't say it's necessarily pushback. We'll always send the stuff over, and they'll always say, yes, we'll look at it. Whether or not they want to pursue it or do something with it, or whether or not the laws in that state are more conservative or more relaxed, it's kind of in their court, right? Like they have to figure out what they want to do. They have to talk to their own prosecutors and see if this is something they want to pursue. And if they feel like, oh, well, it's, we don't want to go based off this evidence, they can always go based off their own evidence. They can always conduct an independent study, or an independent investigation. Are there people that don't want to touch anything we've done? I'm sure. I'm certain there are, but they also don't have to. They can just take the information we've just identified. They can take that information and run with it. For the most part, anyone that we've worked with has been really pleased and grateful and has wanted to work again. And so those are the departments that we'll focus on, that we focus on moving forward, as opposed to, I don't want to say wasting our time, but if a department doesn't find us to be helpful or find our work to be helpful, then we don't want to waste their time either. So we'd rather just be in a place where they find us the most useful.
Sure. So let's go back to these men. And we have only seen men. This just occurred to me. Have you ever encountered a woman seeking a minor?
So this is where I get a lot of tweets saying that I'm, a violent man hater, which is mostly not true. But
Most days.
The woman it's a unicorn. A woman predator is a unicorn. And I have, in all the conversations I've had, have not had a woman reach out to me. I've had plenty of men pretending to be women to reach out, but also the detectives and investigators who I've spoken with as well say having a woman is very, very unusual.
Well, I think, yeah, statistically, the rate of a female perpetrator in this kind of crime is going to be lower. And my guess is they would not go the online stalking route. It would be more of a human in real life connection, manipulating or exploiting. That would be my guess.
I think, this is just a theory, and I don't claim to be an expert on this, but overseas, when I read about human trafficking, the woman is the mama-san. Right, she's the house mother, or something of that sort, or it's really strictly around sex trafficking or something that is a revenue making model, not necessarily just a one-on-one, hands-on kind of. I don't say just as though to make light of it, but it's a one-on-one, hands-on perpetration kind of model.
That makes sense. And I'm thinking of teachers, like this outlying situation where we see a female teacher abuse a minor male student. Again, I think we see those in the news because they're outliers. I don't think they happen very often, but I also just wonder if there's that relational component, not to over genderize this, but what we do see on the show, some threads. So I'd like to talk about these men, and they are very obsessed with the virginity of your decoys. And that really struck me. And I put it in my notes, and I'm like, this sounds like I'm being kind of like bombastic or something, but really it struck me so deeply. Why? I mean, this is a larger kind of meta level question, but you said you can't assume men are reaching out to commit a crime or to actually engage in sex. You have to kind of just, they're reaching out to a minor for some reason. I guess we can't assume, but very quickly we learn many of them really want to know how old you are and if you're a virgin, and they would really like to be the one to take that title away. What is this about? I mean, I know you're not a psychiatrist, but what are your thoughts on this? It's so disturbing to me.
I would love to hear what you think of episode 5 at some point.
I can't wait.
But I think, I could talk about this all day, and I know we probably don't want to get into the weeds. I think there are a lot of things here. One, I tend to think that, and this is a personal opinion, I think that virginity is a social construct, and the idea that a man could have an experience with a woman and all of a sudden her identity is completely changed is absurd to me. That's one thing. The other is I hear a lot about, it's the forbidden temptation of it. There's also a little bit of this, a theory is that some of these men are perhaps, I'm using my words carefully here. I think some of them are self-conscious about their body or their genitalia. And so if they are with a young girl who has not had any sexual experience, perhaps then their body, what they have to offer is exciting and new, and there's no comparison. For example, I will have some ACMs that will send a photo of their genitalia and will ask questions like, isn't this the biggest you've ever seen? Isn't this the, and it's really just this egotistic, like it's feeding their own ego, it's feeding their own self-importance, it's feeding their own masculinity. And I think there's something to be said about that too. Again, not a psychiatrist, like I probably don't even have a right in discussing this, but just some observations I've made.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to hear, is your anecdotal response and experience, your lived experience doing this work. It really just kind of shook me and like freaked me out and felt really just, I don't know, it just made me really uncomfortable. And just teenage girls' virginity being put as this like the ultimate, you know, in terms of something to kind of revere, obsess over, be interested in. We don't see the reverse for teenage boys. And so I just find it really interesting.
I would actually love to see, I mean, even if you just message me at some point after, I would love to see your reaction to episodes 5 and 6 based on this discussion alone.
Okay.
And I do find it really interesting too. I do think that because, you know, I'm mixed, I'm half Asian, you know, I moved here when I was young, and I think that there is something to be said about the Asian fetishization that's happening in a lot of these episodes also. We don't get into it too much. It's hard to get into the weeds and all these different nuanced, you know, things that come along with these ACMs. But I think that's also part of it. There is something about the fetishization and dehumanization of Asian girls that we see as well that's really interesting. And because I'm mixed, I can kind of get away with being different. Like we're like, oh, I'm Thai, or I'm Filipina, or I'm this. And to see, you know, if it doesn't come out right away, sometimes it eventually comes out like, oh, I'm so excited that you're so exotic. And from my work in my experience with human trafficking, sex workers of color, particularly Asian sex workers, get treated a lot differently because they're kind of commoditized. Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
And so there's a lot of layers that I do find interesting in a very sad way, but still interesting nonetheless, that I think, you know, probably you and I could spend an entire afternoon picking apart, because there's a lot there.
Wow. Well, we will talk after episode 5. I promise I will definitely message you after I watch. So let's talk about the potential victims here. You create these profiles of different girls, and you give them really rich, complex interior and exterior lives. They've got, you know, clothes that match their personality, that match what their family life and activities are. But I'm wondering about the real life application. Like, have you found in your work that some kids are more vulnerable to these exchanges online than others? We tend to want to like write this off easily and be like, well, you know, broken family, or vulnerable because they just moved, or they're disconnected from a support system. But is this more ubiquitous than that? Like, should we all be thinking about this if we have kids between the ages of, like, if they're online and they're alive, should we?
Yeah, I mean, truthfully, as you said, if they're online and they're alive, like, it's regardless of gender identity, regardless of sexuality. I mean, heterosexual boys are also at risk, right? There's a lot of different things. Do I see that there are some markers that ACMs look for? Yes. Anyone that maybe has lack, but I hate to say this because I don't want people to let their guard down, because it's not about being a good kid or a smart kid or a very well-loved kid. It's not about any of those things. It's just about being a kid on the internet. Right. That said, someone who's in foster care, someone who has little parental oversight, a lot of times one of the questions is, you know, like, essentially, where's your dad in the picture? Oh, do you have a dad? Does he live with you? Does he work? You know, what kind of, you know, is someone being bullied at school? Is someone overweight? Is someone maybe not conventionally attractive? Like, think about anything that could have been a source of being self-conscious as a teenager. For me, that list is very, very long. And these people are really good at being manipulative. So they will hone in on something and they will work that one thing until it gets them what they want. That said, we have, and I've tried with different demographics, like regardless of socioeconomic status, I've experimented with different demographics, like this person in a loving home with older brothers, this person in a broken home, this person who's very, very poor, this person who's overweight, this person who, and regardless, someone always reaches out.
It's officially the holiday season, and this is a true story. I recently opened up an Etsy resale shop. I sell vintage goods online, and stamps.com is more important to me than ever before. You've heard me say it once, I will say it again. I use stamps.com, and I'm so grateful because they make it so easy to ship the things I need to ship wherever I need to ship them. Since 1998, stamps.com has been an indispensable tool for nearly 1 million businesses. Stamps.com brings the services of the U.S. Postal Service and UPS right to your computer. Whether you're an office sending invoices, a side hustle Etsy shop, hello, or a full-blown warehouse shipping out orders, Stamps.com will make your life easier. All you need is a computer, standard printer, no special supplies or equipment. Within minutes, you're up and running, printing official postage for any letter, any package, anywhere you want to send. And you'll get exclusive discounts on postage and shipping from USPS and UPS. Once your mail is ready, just schedule a pickup or drop it off. No traffic, no lines. Cut the confusion out of shipping with Stamps.com new rate advisor tool. You can compare shipping rates and timelines to easily find the best option. Save time and money with Stamps.com. There is no risk, and with my promo code POD, that's P-O-D, you get a special offer that includes a 4-week trial, plus free postage, and a digital scale. I love the digital scale because I have no idea how much 4 vintage pink glass coupes weigh. No long-term commitments or contracts. Just go to Stamps.com, click on the microphone at the top of the homepage, and type in POD POD. That's Stamps.com, promo code POD. Stamps.com, never go to the post office again. Right. So what are the conversations? Can you, share what you tell your own children? Because I think this is sort of like the sex talk for us with kids. It's like, we know it's not a one-time thing. We know it's not like one big sit down. This is an ongoing conversation to be having in a home, but it's very hard to know in terms of age, what is appropriate to share, how much is too much, too little, before you find out too late. So what are some parameters parents can be thinking about in terms of talking to their kids?
I grew up in a household where the women were kind of taught to be very differential. And because of that, I feel like I dealt with a lot of things that I would rather sit in my own discomfort than point out someone else's, like perhaps ruffle anyone's feathers. And the one thing that I am teaching my kids now is to not accept bad behavior or violent speech or anything like that from men or from anyone. And I think one of the things that we can all teach our kids is to recognize when we feel like something's off, when we get that gut feeling in our stomach where we can go, oh, something's wrong there, or this doesn't feel right, or I don't know about this, but then take that and feel comfortable enough to tell someone about it. So this thing happens, and maybe I don't feel quite strong enough to go, I don't want to do that, but I can say, Mom, this weird thing happened. If this had been me as a teenager, if I was a teenager in 2021, I would have been absolutely at risk for all of these things because I felt like I couldn't tell anyone about it. Like I wouldn't be able to talk to my parents. I wouldn't be like all of these things. And then always talk about what can happen online, because I know some parents will say, well, just don't give your kid a smartphone or just don't let them have Snapchat. It's not just about a smartphone. It's not just about Snapchat. It's about anywhere you can talk to someone online.
Right.
I've gotten messages on Words with Friends, or, there's coloring book apps, there's gaming apps. Even if your kid doesn't have a smartphone, well, they use the internet for school, or even if they don't, they go to a friend's house and the friend has the internet. And there's a number of different ways this can go. So these conversations are really, really important. And the one thing I say is to just have this open line of communication with your kids. And so I talk with my kids about puberty, about sex, about online safety, about all of these things all the time, because I think it's really important. And I also want them to feel like if something goes awry, they can come to Mom.
Yeah. But like, for real, is there any app that you should just be like, no, your kid should not have that? Because I remember Kick came out. When Kick came out, I remember hearing about that, and I was like, nope, no Kick. Like, if anybody has Kick,
I would say, sure, if you want some apps, no Kick.
Okay.
No Omegle.
I've never heard of that one. See, I'm sure there's new ones that I don't even know about.
Yeah, so
Omegle
will pair you up randomly with someone else to chat, and sometimes you're just typing, and it can seems like it can be innocuous and fun, but it usually isn't. But it also does that pairs up for video. So you'll see like a lot of kids will get together during a sleepover and video chat someone, but often sometimes it's like a bunch of little kids and then someone else who is, has insidious intentions on the other end. I would say for sure, stay off Omegle, stay off Kick. I'm trying to think if Kick would sue me for saying this. I have found that Kick often has people who are looking for child sex abuse material or drugs. And that's kind of the extent of it.
Okay. Say no more. That's really, really helpful.
But if Kick wants to fix that, they can call me and I'm happy to help. I advise a tech company that is actually working with all of these platforms to make their platform safer, because it's beyond us parents doing something, right? It's about these companies are now feeling like they have a responsibility. They're feeling the responsibility of making their user base, making their platform safe for their user bases. So I advise a company called Spectrum. And what they're doing is they're taking a lot of our conversations and we're recognizing patterns with these groomers and they're feeding it to their artificial intelligence. So their artificial intelligence can better detect for signs of child abuse and other toxic behavior. And so they work with companies like Pinterest and Tinder and gaming apps and all these other places where bad actors are online. And so I think that's like one of my goals with SOSA is that if we use a multi-pronged approach, educating caregivers, holding companies to a standard and helping them, make their platform safer, and education and talking to kids, like all of these things, that's what's going to move the needle.
Well, that's so cool, because one of my later questions was going to be about legislation. Like, how much of your work do you hope will affect legislation? And does this working and consulting with tech kind of circumvent? It's so smart to go in that direction, right? Because that's like what's moving the fastest, and that's where like the future of business is. But can they do all that? I guess there have to be legal parameters and ramifications for what they can do to a person. I don't know. I guess does that work with the legislative aspect?
Yeah. So, I mean, as a nonprofit, I'm limited in what I can do. So for example, Moms Demand Action, and in every town, they're not actually a nonprofit. They're grassroots funded because they work so much with politics.
Okay.
I do speak with legislators and I tell them what I would like to see. We're hoping that Undercover Underage inspires raising the age of consent from 16 to 18. Ooh. Because I think that developmentally, a 16-year-old is a lot different from an 18-year-old. If a 16-year-old can't vote, we should be protecting them from like 75-year-old men who want to date them. That's where I stand.
I mean, that's a huge takeaway on the show, because more than once I heard the man saying, oh, if only you were 16. How old are you again? 15 and a half. I wish you were 6. If only you were 16.
Right. But these men are still in their 60s. Like, well, I know. But we're old. Well, in episode 2, that guy was like, well, I had sex with a girl who was 16 and a half, and I gave her $50 because she was really poor. Like that.
Benevolent.
That's what we see, like they're just waiting. And in fact, this is just it's an arbitrary rule. If the age of consent was 13, would they be looking for 12-year-olds? Like, I don't know.
Yes, but I agree to raise it at least to the other standard of adulthood that we typically recognize in the United States as being 18. Like, why wouldn't we do that?
Right.
Oh my God.
And the other thing, some states have grooming statutes. So the thing that has bothered me a lot since working in this space is that there are a lot of things that are awful and abusive, but they are not illegal. In a lot of states, it is not illegal to communicate with an 11-year-old girl and say, send me photos of your feet for masturbatory purposes. It's creepy, but it's not illegal. It should be illegal. That should be illegal. And in a grooming statute, I think would, not being an attorney, but a grooming statute would help that. So as I speak with legislators about what I would like to see, I certainly, I'm limited in a certain stance, but doing that as well as working in tech and as well as, pushing for empathy-led education in schools, I think those are the things that are going to move the needle too.
Yeah, I would think these statutes would have to be federal. I mean, I just don't know why in one state that could be okay and not another, but that's like about so many things in our country. Like,
yeah. I mean, some states the age of consent is 18. Some states there are grooming statutes, and some states there just aren't. Yeah,
you can get married at 16 in some states too. So I mean, these things all kind of work together. I want to talk a little bit about like tactics and approach within your team, because the other really cool part that I especially think a true crime audience might enjoy is your teams. They're like citizen detectives, like figuring out with the little nuggets of info you get about these adult seeking minors, finding past employment places, possible locations, like that is very thrilling to watch. Like, you have a really cool team. Can you talk a little bit about strategy, approach, and how difficult, because I know it's been edited for television, it looks like lots of wins and it moves very quickly, but I would imagine this is quite a lengthy, tedious process.
Oh, yeah, there's a lot of crying and cursing sometimes,
Yeah.
or someone, like sometimes it'll be Kelly that says, this is effing hopeless, and and that's it. And then I'll cry, and then I'll be upset, and I'll have to go into another room and put on headphones and just like listen to music while I think about what's going on. And then we all end up ordering ice cream, and we do Uber Eats, we do a Carvel Fudgy the Whale, and then we're all sitting around the kitchen counter at like 2 a.m, just all spoons into a Fudgy the Whale, like, being really upset. That does happen for certain. We have taken a lot of L's for sure. So the process, I mean, you see in that room, like we do have screens up, we're screen recording, we're really analyzing, we're looking at things where there have been times where you'll see in episode, I forget what episode, but you'll see that at one point I said, oh, this person is not in the US because I saw the outlet in the back, and this guy claims to be in another state. I see the outlet in the back, and then I also see a Manchester United flag. I'm like, this guy is in the UK. There are times that we find little things and we hold on to those, and we do a little digging, and there are times that we're wrong, but then lots of red herrings, which can be really frustrating. So Kelly is our research lead. I've known Kelly for a decade. We've worked together before. She's really great. She puts little things together and goes digging. Shelby is our social media lead. She is definitely, very much on the internet, especially when it comes to niche topics that I know nothing about. If an ACM wants to talk gaming, anime, she's the one that I'm tagging you in on this because I don't know any of those things. Right. Matt is our visuals lead. He is a very talented photographer, and so he'll go through, and he's the one in charge of de-aging me, to the point where I have to leave the room when he's de-aging me because it starts to hurt my feelings. Like, talking about it out loud. He's like, so we'll just take the marionette lines and all these little lines around her eyes and see how her skin sags here. Like, I'm going to leave the room now. I cannot hear this anymore.
Yeah, I could see that could be humbling, but not every 38-year-old can pull off what you're doing. So you have to like take some comfort.
No, I mean, it's a lot of, the joke is that I just assume every predator I talk to has cataracts. And then Avalon is our story developer. And so she's a writer by trade, and she's the one that really kind of is like, okay, Flory is going to be a Capricorn and she's going to do this. And she really kind of brings these decoys to life. So it's a really good team. What you don't see is that we also have like research and support. There's Damien. There's a few others. We had an office in the attic and a little support room to the side of that big situation room that you see, where we're constantly printing out evidence and putting together binders for law enforcement, and just making sure that we have everything everything squared away. It's a ton of evidence collection, and we have to make sure that every message gets logged, and so that just takes a lot of administrative work as well.
So how often are you doing the active, what we see on the show? And is that house that you use, don't locate it or anything, but is that like a full-time operational office for your team, or is that just like a set for the show?
So we do these in sprints, one, because it's expensive, right? This is like a really expensive thing to do. And two, because just for everyone's mental health, if you can't do that every day. Yeah, it's just not sustainable to do every day. So when we do these sprints, sometimes they are a week, 2 weeks, 10 weeks. It really just depends on funding, our goals, if we're what the goal is of maybe law enforcement that we're working with at a time. Sometimes I will just go out and do an op myself with law enforcement, and we don't need all of this, the whole team. We don't need to go full hog. So it depends. That house was for that sprint. We rented that house for that sprint. There have been times where we'll set dress in office, or we'll do one hotel room, or, it doesn't necessarily have to be a full house at all times. I took a phone call from a a room at a police station where they just have like a couch and a chair and like a picture on the wall. I'm like, this will work. This will be fine.
Yeah.
So it really just depends. In theory, SOSA would raise enough money where we could do these with more regularity and with more resources and more support, because it really does get to the point where it's just a matter of being completely understaffed.
Sure, it's bandwidth, of course. But how do you not become traumatized? Because we see it. I mean, you get exposed to graphic situations and exchanges via video messaging, and it's upsetting to watch you experience it, and we witness you having a reaction. What do you do to create boundaries, self-protection, and not have to relive traumatic scenarios?
It's always a hard question, because I feel like I don't necessarily do it well, but I do it somehow because I'm able to function as an adult. I do set really strict boundaries between work and home. So at my office, which isn't that house, but at my office, I don't have pictures of my kids. I don't have drawings. I don't have family photos. It's just the SOSA office. And then at home, I am just the woman that drives kids to practice. You know what I mean? I'm just the woman that burns dinner. I'm not anything else. And that's really important to me. And when I travel, for work, I'm focused on work. And when I come home, I'm focused on home. And having those boundaries helps. There was one time in the very beginning where, because of circumstances, I had to do like a video call from my house, and it was awful. And I won't do that again.
Oh my gosh.
I don't know, like ever again. And I keep really like, I won't wear that shirt because, or we can't have that poster, or now I can't buy my kid that shirt. And it can get tedious, but that part is really important to me. Even when we name decoys, we go around the room. I'm like, tell me all of your nieces' names now, so we don't accidentally name a decoy.
Yeah.
So,
oh my gosh. Yeah.
We do keep boundaries. I try to find ways to not be on a device. There's like, I get off the big device at work and I come home and I'm on the little device, and then I'm on the laptop, the medium-sized device, and then I'm on my watch, the tiny device. And I try not to do too many devices. I talk with this person that also works for that company called Spectrum. And so I work on like the grooming for sex abuse side, and she has long worked on the grooming for terrorism side, right? Like grooming to join like a neo-Nazi group.
Wow.
And so she's seen a lot of stuff too. And so we sometimes trade notes. And what she does, she lives like near the beach, and she goes outside a lot, and that helps her kind of like get perspective. And so what I've been doing at night is I will get cozy and I will make myself a cup of tea, and I will turn on Planet Earth, but I'll mute it, and then I'll just queue up my own Spotify playlist that I actually just named Planet Earth. So I just sit there and I listen to music that I like, and I'm very cozy. And then I'm watching the scenery of like a really big Earth that I'm a teeny tiny itty bitty part of, and getting that perspective I find really soothing. And I'm more likely to sleep peacefully and not grind my teeth at night. You know what I mean? So that's
beautiful.
I'm open to suggestions, but those are the things that have been really nice for me. I find that I hyper fixate on a hobby at a time. Last summer, I was super into mountain biking, because when you're focused on not falling and just eating it down the side of a mountain, then you can't focus on
no room
like
for anything else.
Pictures or imagery or voices. You can't think of anything else. So yes, anything that really I have to focus my mind on or focus my hands on. I'm not great at meditating, but I will put on a meditation, and I have a tracing journal where I'll just kind of like meditatively trace.
Yes.
I'm bad at kind of just sitting and doing the meditation, but if I'm doing something that feels meditative, like drawing or tracing or coloring, that feels nice.
These are great suggestions. And speaking of hyper obsessing on a hobby, you're talking to a woman who went to a international vintage postcard collection yesterday in Manhattan, because that's fun for people on Sundays. Some people brunch. I go hang out with old people. Those are really, really good practices, though. I think people will really find something they could probably also utilize for themselves, whatever they do for work. The last thing I want to ask you about in terms of the work is, what has been the biggest success that you were like, maybe focus on one that we might see in the show, just something that was like, this is amazing and you're so pleased with the results, because I know you don't have any control of what happens after your participation. And then what was the biggest just utter letdown, major bummer?
I think the biggest letdown is any time that we see that someone has the propensity to harm children, but they have not technically committed a crime. They have not technically broken the law. So in spite of all of the things that we've seen that are really abusive, and in spite of all the signs that they are abusive, the law is that it is not illegal to ask a minor for XYZ or send this to XYZ, or, the stupidest stuff. Like, they're fully naked, but their hand is like just partially covering part of their genitalia, so it's not considered full nudity. Like, that's wow. That is what probably is like, ugh, just a knife in the chest all the time.
Yeah.
The biggest wins, I feel like anytime there's another stat that, again, I don't feel very confident about, but the Child Rescue Coalition references a study that says the average perpetrator has somewhere around 50 plus victims in their lifetime. And even if it's half that or a tenth of that, in reality, knowing that we're able to make sure people like Duke that you see in episode 2, or Mitch that you see in episode 1, or the teacher that you see in episode 3, no longer have access to doing that, to harming kids, especially someone like the teacher who had access to kids every single day. While it's not celebratory, it feels like that's a win, because there would be victims who are out there somewhere or no longer would be victims.
Absolutely.
And that feels good enough.
Yeah. Well, before I let you go, I do ask all my guests what their last meal would be. So what would yours be if tonight you had to pick your last meal?
I am going to assume this in the context of I'm on death row. I know you're not saying that, but that is the context I'll assume.
You would not be the first to make the assumption. I feel so bad. I'm like, I really didn't mean this to be so morbid and dark, but yes, please.
Oh, okay. So if that's the case, then I don't want, I feel badly for the poor person who has to run around town and get all the things for me. So I would just say nachos with a good amount of sour cream and a couple cans of Diet Coke, and then enough gin for me to forget about what's about to happen.
Great answer.
If you're like, we will fly in anything from anywhere, then I would say a lobster roll from Maine, really good bread pudding, and a lot of whipped cream. Just leave the can. Just leave the can with me. And that would be my last meal.
I like the two options. It's very considerate of the people who are going to be accommodating you. It's a great answer. Very specific. Well, just quickly tell everybody where we can find you and SOSA, and for anyone inclined to help, are there ways we can do so?
Sure. So the show is Undercover Underage, now streaming on Discovery Plus. SOSA, we are online. Our website is sosatogether.org. We would love your donations at sosatogether.org/donate. You can give once, you can give monthly, you can even do that little roundup thing on your credit card where if you spend $12.90 at Target, it'll just round up to 13 and SOSA gets the 10 cents.
Nice.
If you're the kind of person who's disciplined enough to ever spend $12.90.
Right. I don't know any such person.
We're also on Instagram at SOSA Together, Facebook at SOSA Together. And I'm also on, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, all of the social at Roo, ROO, like kangaroo, _POW, Powell, Roo Powell on all the social as well.
Perfect.
And if you listen to all of my methods for self-care and you have one for me, I will gladly take, solicited. So it's one of those things where I will take unsolicited recommendations on, but right now I realize I'm soliciting
You're
them.
actively soliciting.
Yes.
Okay,
Right.
you heard it here, listeners. I'll take some too. Self-care practices, especially those of us who might have vicarious trauma from the work we do. We would love to hear those. And Roo, it was a pleasure. Thank you so much for killing the small talk. And everybody be sure to check out Undercover Underage on Discovery Plus.
Thank you.
Dialogue is a Yellow Tape Media production, audio engineered by Jason Usry and produced hosted and edited by me, Rebecca Sebastian. If you love the podcast, please consider becoming a diehard by signing up at patreon.com/dialogue. Other ways to support the show? Follow along on social media. We are at Dialogue Pod across platforms, and you can now watch most episodes on YouTube by subscribing to my channel, Rebecca Sebastian. For more information or to drop me a note, visit RebeccaSebastian.com. Until next time, thank you for listening and killing the small talk.